cost. The name itself is there, Havler's opportunity cost theory. Here we'll talk about this first, okay? And then if I go back and explain that, it will be clear for you. So in the table, you can see that there are two products, okay? Two products, X and Y, and two countries, two products, wheat and rice, and two countries who are trying to engage in trade. That is X and Y. Let's imagine that is X and Y. And you can see that the opportunity cost of 1 unit of wheat for country X is 0.5 unit of rice. Okay. And for wheat, when we go with production of wheat, the opportunity cost when we talk about rice, it is 2 units. 2 units of wheat when you go with production of rice, and 1 unit of wheat when you go with the opportunity costs are put in the table. So here in case of wheat, country X is having an opportunity cost of 0.5 unit of rice, whereas in case of rice, it is 2 units of wheat. Same as the case in case of Y, country Y, it is for wheat, it is 1.67 units of rice, as well as for rice, it is 0.6 unit of wheat. So looking at this table itself, it is very clear that for country X, the opportunity cost is less with respect to the wheat production. Actually, when you talk about wheat production, they are going with only 0.5, that is less than 1 unit of rice opportunity cost, whereas in case of rice, 2 units of wheat. So the theory talks from this perspective that production of 1 unit of rice requires sacrifice of more than 1 unit of wheat. So automatically, that's why as per the opportunity cost theory, country X should go with producing wheat. Why? Because the opportunity cost for country X in production of wheat is comparatively lesser than the rice. And it's just the reverse in case of Y. In case of Y, for them, as you can see that if they go with production of rice, the opportunity cost is less than 1. Right? So country Y should go with producing rice. So this is the background of explanation of this theory. Okay. And there are certain assumptions, but broadly the assumptions just to make the condition into an equilibrium. That's all. Because if you have so many factors for explanation, the theory might be difficult to explain. So that's the logic behind nullifying, which we are coming to. Okay. So now what we have to do is, now the country X, we will give that, say Holland. They go with the production of wheat, and maybe Y, which is, we talk from the perspective of Denmark. They go with the production of rice. Just an imaginary one, okay? They go with the production of rice. Now, these two countries should be engaging in trade, exchanging rice and wheat. Okay, so rice to Holland will be given by Denmark, and wheat to Denmark will be given by Holland. That's the concept of this theory. Okay, so the opportunity cost theory. Now we go to the beginning where we will just discuss. The opportunity cost theory makes assumptions, certain assumptions before going with the explanation. One is there is perfect competition, which means prices are regulated by demand and supply. And there is no inequilibrium with respect to factors of production like land, labor, capital. All these, it remains almost fixed. There is no inequilibrium with respect to factors of production. So it is easy for you to, you have all types of factors of production, so you can make a choice according to your wish and will. So that's why the theory has nullified the supply of factors of production to remain constant, fix it over the period in these two countries who are engaging in the international trade. The third is the price of the commodity and marginal cost of. Marginal cost is an additional cost incurred in producing 1 unit of this product. So the price and marginal cost are same, which means all other factors remaining constant, the price of producing this particular thing would be what you have incurred extra for producing it. That's why all other factors, the cost, all other cost of production activities or factors remain constant. That's the indirect assumption of saying that price of commodity and marginal cost of producing the same are equal. Marginal cost is cost of producing one additional unit of the mentioned product. In this case, it can be wheat or rice, right? Then perfect employment equilibrium means all the available inputs within the country are used to its fullest. So imperfect is an opposite condition where there are input factors which are not used, which are remaining idle. So the opportunity cost will be increasing. So in order to nullify those effects, in order to simplify the calculation, the theory assumes that there is perfect employment equilibrium. So all the input factors are used to the fullest. There is no opportunity cost associated with any of them. So these are the basic assumptions of opportunity cost theory. So there is perfect competition, demand and supply decides the price of a product. Then supply of factors of production remains fixed, price of the commodity and the marginal cost. There is not much difference, which means the price which is included in production of this particular product is considered when you look into the decision. Marginal costing technique, that's what we have learned. Marginal costing technique, the change that is occurred due to this particular line of production or due to this extra unit of production. So that's what you consider in this as per the opportunity cost theory. And of course, perfect employment equilibrium. Then the theory looks up the concept of how you can explain that. Maybe in this particular example, we named the two countries as X and Y. And you can see that the country X, they look into the opportunity cost of production of two items like wheat and rice. They have a good trade relationship with each other, and they want to know whether they should go with concentrating on production of wheat or rice. So the theory tries to explain or give an answer to this scenario by considering the opportunity cost involved in production of wheat and rice. So that's what we consider here. So as you can see that in case of X, the opportunity cost with production of wheat is lesser because it's just 0.5 unit of rice. The sacrifice opportunity cost is, as you say, the cost of next best alternative foregone. So in this case, your next best alternative is considered to be, if it is wheat, it is rice. If it is rice, the next best alternative is wheat. So that's why we look into what is the sacrifice, the cost of sacrifice. So we can see that the sacrifice is less than 1 unit of rice. Whereas in case of rice, it is more than 1 unit of wheat, 2 units of wheat for X. Same we will look into the case of Y, where we find that the opportunity cost for production of wheat is more than 1 unit of rice, whereas in case of rice, it is less than 1 unit of wheat. So that's why, as per this theory, it is said that you can go with production of, as we say, rice and wheat in case of X and rice in case of Y, because the comparative cost is much lesser with which is associated with these production. So this is the crux, or this is the basic understanding of this theory. In fact, it is aligned with the other theories like the Hershey-Olin theory, where you talk about abundance and the scarcity. So here, the particular nature here is you are not limiting that to one factor for explanation. You are looking into the concept of opportunity cost, or the cost of next best alternative foregone for achieving the objective of this particular thing. So that's the idea behind explanation of this concept. So that's about the opportunity cost theory. Now the next theory which we are going to look at it is production life cycle approach, which is pretty different from all other theories we had been trying to explain. This theory see, it is proposed by Raymond Berman in the mid of 1960s, and here the basis of concept of explanation was based on US market conditions. Okay, and Mr. Raymond Berman, he went with explaining the concept by mentioning that every kind of new innovation, with quoting different examples, he said technology-based innovations during those time, okay, when he was just proposing this theory, he said it is happening in the US market, okay. So all technology advancements or innovation based on technology is first happening in the US market, and the product, and he is trying to explain the product life cycle based on that. Okay, based on the US market. So he has gone with 5 stages, which is stage 1, where the new product, innovative product is introduced in the market, in the domestic market, and then looking into the demand across the globe. Maybe once it satisfies the domestic demand, the product slowly moves to international market. That's the stage 1. That is new product being introduced and slowly moving into different markets. First, the product is introduced in the domestic market. See, it was for him, the domestic market was US, because he was explaining with the concept that every new innovation is set to happen in the US market for the first time. So that was the context in which he was trying to prove this product life cycle theory. Okay, so he said the product is introduced in US market and slowly it is moving to other markets based on their development. Because some of the markets will be very, especially some of the countries which been quoted as the low developing countries or economies with less development, such countries, maybe the innovation will take a long time to come in, but the rest advanced nations may be adopting to these technologies based on their requirements. So that's why it's moving to those countries for the first time. And stage 2 is new markets would be expanded, like depending upon the requirement of each country. The concept, the product moves from different markets. So that's what he talks about, the growth stage. Okay, and then you can see the technology, any type of technology, as I have just brought one example of personal computers. They had its origin in US market, but slowly it went into different markets. We're coming to that. So that's where the growth happens, when more and more markets try to purchase it from this. In our case, it is US market. And stage 3 is something called a standardization of the product. Now, this might be very easy for you to understand if you look into the operating system, or if you look into the languages that's being used, if you look into the features of the product. After some time, the product gets standardized for each market, depending on the requirement of the market, depending upon the progress in technology in that market. So that's where the company will think about licensing or franchising the product, because you already know what is the set of features for your product, and based on that you would be slowly giving the right for companies in different countries, different locations, to go with production of these products. If it is manufacturing, same as the case, you can go with, say, if you look into the consumer durable, you can see that initially the product being introduced, it's been patented, the product slowly introduced to different market. Take the example of Coke, that's very easy for you to understand. So what did the company do is, they looking into the taste preferences of each country, they first standardize the product. Now slowly they outsource, they licensed for manufacturing in the same location of its same. Say for example, in India also we have production, different production factories where they go with production of this aerated drink. So that is what we call as the licensing, or as you say, some of them would be given with the franchisee. That's another way we have learned that, right? Franchisee. See, in MACD and all, you might be very sure with the concept of franchising, Domino's or MACD or KFC, all that functions under the concept of franchising. So that's what we call as the maturity state. Now comes the real market intervention, where we talk about decline stage. Why? Because once they know, see, if you give the license, if you give the franchising, they know how to go with manufacturing this product. So what they would be doing is, the foreign companies in different locations, foreign countries, okay, they will try to manufacture it using their own raw materials, using the available raw materials, using the different factors of production. And sometimes what happened here is, the same product can be made available at a cheaper price, maybe with more or less similar variation, slight variation. The same product can be made available at a cheaper price. So then the process of stage 5, which is called as reverse import stage, happens. How does that happen? The parent, here in our example, it is US. US will start importing from those countries where the production is cheap, where the production is comparatively cheaper because of the favorable factors of production. Maybe labor is cheap, maybe, as we say, the other resources are available at a cheaper price. So that's why the production happens in these foreign locations, and then the parent country imports to that. That's what we call as the reverse import stage. So it's very easy to understand if you look from different perspectives. Say, I have put an example also for this. So according to Raymond Verman, the international trade happens he has tried to explain international trade by explaining it through product life cycle. And he says that every product, it passes to at least 5 stages in its life. And basically that starts with the introduction of this innovative idea in a market which is supposed to be the domestic market. And then this innovation is slowly transferred to different markets. Okay, different markets can be foreign market depending upon the level of development in those nations. And in the meantime, the number of markets could be increased. You can look at how US went with marketing Microsoft products to different markets. Now they are almost in a saturation stage. They are available in most of the markets, which is permitted, giving exemption to some of the conservative nations like China or South Korea, like or North Korea. So some of the nations where there is restriction, in all other markets, the products are made available. And then, so that's what we call as a maturity stage. You go with a specific type of standardization, and then once you reach to that stage, you have a upper hand on how to go with what are the features with your product, what are the features with which the product needs to be made available to the end users, all these. So you go with the standardization, and you start with giving licensing or other kind of market entry operations for the countries in which you market your product or services. Generally, Raymond theory, he tried to explain the manufacturing sector through his this theory, but maybe it is equally applicable to the service industry also. And then the last stage is, which is very common in most of the advanced kind of technology, that is reverse import stage, where the parent country, the companies in the parent country, try to import the same product which is manufactured as per the license, or maybe with slight variations from the foreign locations where they could get the same product at a cheaper price, or they could get where the factors of production are comparatively lower, so the product cost can be reduced because of less cost of production involved. And so that's where they go with the reverse import stage. So these are the 5 stages in the product life cycle. Now just look at an example of the PC, the personal computer. So the product was developed in US market. The so-called concept of personal computer got developed during 1970s, and then slowly they started selling the product during 1980s and 1990s to different markets. In India also, we can imagine when the product came, computers, the system, all these. Now we are developed to a greater extent. The present stage is most of these products, earlier it was manufactured in US market and then it was marketed to different locations. But now most of these products are manufactured in some of its location in as we call Asian countries or Mexico. Like China is one supermarket for manufacturing this product. And then it is again reverse. It is reverse import that is happening. They import it to their domestic country and sell it, because in these markets in Asia and Mexico, these products are manufactured with a cheaper cost. One is labor, the other factors of production are comparatively cheaper in these countries. So they manufacture it and then import it to their parent location. So this is a good example of the theory that was proposed by Verman. So in our today's class, we discussed about two theories which qualify under the modern theories of international trade. The first one, we talked about the opportunity cost theory, where the author tried to explain the basic reason behind international trade through opportunity cost, through looking at the opportunity cost. And he explained that the nations should engage in trade with each other for those commodities where the opportunity cost is least quoted, for those commodities for which they have least opportunity cost. So that's the crux of opportunity cost theory. The second theory which we discussed in the class that was proposed by Verman is based on the product life cycle. The product life cycle remains same. There is not much difference except the last stage, which talks about reverse import stage. So he actually, at the time of introduction of this theory during 1960s, he was trying to explain it through quoting example from US market. And in his theory, he specifically says that many of the technological, or he has said that most of the technological innovations are first happening in the US market, and slowly it is moving to different markets. And during those stages, there are 5 distinguishable or separately identifiable stages for a product life. So that is first when it is introduced in the market, slowly when it's expanding to the other markets, which talks about the growth market. And then the third one is the product gets more or less a standardized form, where the company thinks of giving production right or selling right to different markets. Then the last stage is a clubbed one, the decline stage, where the domestic market may be slowly withdrawing from production, and the foreign markets, they might be manufacturing it and then selling it back to the parent, the country. Here in his example, it was US, selling it back to the domestic market because of the involvement of low cost of production. So these are the two theories which we have discussed under the modern theory of international trade. All right.